Please pause the video and try these warm-up problems. All right, hopefully you tried both of these. You should have gotten in problem number 1, 25.13 centimeters. Remember, don't forget that in order to do a problem like that, you have to always have your angle in radians. So you had to convert it first, then you're able to multiply your new radian value times the radius. In number 2, sketching a picture helps you here. So I've located that -7, -3 point in the third quadrant, created a right triangle, did the Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse, which is always positive, and then I went through SOHCAHTOA and I rationalized anything that had a square root in the denominator. All right, today we're going to continue with section 5.4, where we are going to think about trig functions and also relate it back to the unit circle that we learned yesterday. Okay, so once again, we want to be able to evaluate without a calculator. And now that we have the unit circle, we have two different ways of being able to do this. So just another reminder that when you have a unit circle, you should be able to fill this in based off of the first quadrant alone. Okay, you'll need to know that you want to go in a counterclockwise to name your positive angles, but you can find your ordered pairs based off of those special right triangles. So these were all the values of that unit circle, something that you're going to want to have memorized. So keep looking over that so you can quickly be able to complete and create this unit circle. Okay, so we're going to use this in the evaluating process. I'm also going to remind you how we had done it previously in the other section prior to knowing this unit circle. So let's dive into some examples. Say I wanted to evaluate the tangent of -210 degrees. Remember, without a calculator, in the past, we've then sketched pictures to help us with this. And in order to use the unit circle or sketch a picture, we have to have angles that are actually in our unit circle. And so unfortunately, a negative angle like -210 isn't going to be seen. So we're going to have to start off by finding a positive coterminal angle, no matter which way you decide you are going to evaluate. So because it's in degrees, I want to take my angle and we're going to add 360 on to that negative angle, and that's going to give us an angle of 150 degrees. Okay, so if you were to sketch the picture, 150 degrees, you would need to know that's going to be, if it's 0 degrees, up here is 90, and then 180, we're going to be here in the second quadrant. Okay, 150 is somewhere over here. Notice that it's closer to 180 than it would be over here to 360. So to find my reference angle, I'm taking that bigger angle of 180. I'm subtracting that new positive coterminal angle, and that tells me that I have a 30-degree reference angle. So that means I can drop that down to create a triangle. I can fill in my 30, 60, 90 sides. Remember, across from the 30 is 1. Across from the 60 is the square root of 3. However, that one needs to be negative because you're moving to the left. The 1 stays positive because you're moving up. The hypotenuse is 2. You're always going to be positive. So there are my sides. Now we can finish it out with the tangent. Remember, the tangent, if you think about SOHCAHTOA, is opposite over adjacent. So the tangent of this -210 degree angle is going to be 1 over -√3. So I'll multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 3 to rationalize that out. So we'll have a negative value of -√3 over 3. But had you understood and used the unit circle, we could then, if we have it created, understand that with our reference angle of 150, this was the information here in the second quadrant. We have the ordered pair, -√3 over 2, 1/2. Remember, in an ordered pair, cosine is first, sine is second. Tangent is always going to be defined as sine divided by cosine. So even though tangent isn't in our unit circle, we can take those two terms, we can divide them. So notice that sine is 1/2, cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. When we divide, because we have the denominators with our fractions of 2, those essentially cancel out, and it gives you 1 over negative root 3, which then takes us back to what we did up here to rationalize to get to our final answer. So you have two different options. It just depends on which way you think is faster. But once again, it is important to know your unit circle, so that can help you there. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Cosecant of 11 pi over 4. Just like this first problem, 11 pi over 4 isn't going to be in your unit circle. And so let's think about the fact that we can find a positive coterminal angle that is much smaller that will be in the picture or the unit circle one time around. So because our denominator is 4, think about it, 2 pi over 1 is the same thing then as 8 pi over 4. So I'm going to take my 11 pi over 4, subtract 8 pi over 4, and that's going to give me 3 pi over 4. So once again, if I wanted to then sketch a picture like we've done in the past, we'd have 0, we'd have 4 pi over 4. This would be 2 pi over 4 up here at the top. So notice that 3 pi over 4 is going to fall here in the second quadrant in the middle. That little reference angle here is closer to 4 pi over 4 than it is to the 8 pi over 4. Notice that 4 pi over 4 minus 3 pi over 4 gives you a reference angle of pi over 4. In degrees, that's a 45-degree angle. So we have a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Remember, one leg is negative, one leg is positive. The hypotenuse is always positive. So once I have that, we can think about cosecant. Cosecant, remember, relates to sine. It's the reciprocal of sine. If sine is opposite over hypotenuse, I want hypotenuse over opposite. So the cosecant of 11 pi over 4 is us taking the square root of 2, putting it over the opposite, which is 1, and so that just simplifies down to the square root of 2. Had we used our lovely 3 pi over 4 and found it on the unit circle, well, we would have found it in the second quadrant. And notice that we then have the ordered pair, negative root 2 over 2, and then the square root of 2 over 2. Like I said, cosecant isn't going to be in the unit circle just like tangent wasn't, but if we know cosine is first and sine is second, I want to focus on this second term in this ordered pair. What I want to do is I want to flip it around. I want 2 over the square root of 2. So then I'd have to rationalize. I'd multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 2. That would give me 2 root 2 over 2, which notice then that simplifies to the square root of 2. So 2 different ways to do the exact same problem. All right, so I'm going to start just using the unit circle for the rest of these. But once again, if you feel like you like to sketch the picture, by all means do that. If I'm talking about the sine of 585 degrees, it's not going to be in my unit circle. So we're going to find a smaller positive coterminal angle by taking 585 and subtracting 360. Notice that when I subtract it once, I'm going to get 225. So once again, if I'm focusing on the unit circle, I'm going to find 225 over in the third quadrant. Because if you think about it, it's going to be between 180 and it's going to be between 270. Okay, so I'm in that third quadrant. So if you're looking at your picture, that means we're dealing with an ordered pair of negative root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2. We're talking about sine. Once again, in our ordered pair, cosine is first and sine is second. So if you know what your unit circle is, right off the bat, we already have our answer. It's negative root 2 over 2. Looking at the secant of 7 pi over 6, that value is actually already in my unit circle. Notice that once again, it's going to be, if you're thinking about your picture, we've got your value for pi, which would technically be 6 pi over 6. This down here is 9 pi over 6, which is really 3 pi over 2 on your unit circle. But you're going to find that value of 7 pi over 6 here in the third quadrant. Okay, so when you find it in the third quadrant, you have the ordered pair, negative root 3 over 2, negative a half. So secant is not going to be on the unit circle because the ordered pair is cosine and sine. But secant relates to cosine. It is the reciprocal of cosine. So I'm going to take that first fraction and I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to keep the negative on the top. It doesn't really matter, but I only want one negative sign. Notice that this cannot be my final answer because I don't want a square root in my denominator. So I'm going to rationalize by multiplying the top and the bottom by the square root of 3. So that gives me negative 2 root 3 on the top, and it'll give me 3 on the bottom. I can't simplify that any further, so that is my final answer. Okay, a couple more problems. Once again, let's think about using the unit circle to help us. Negative 495 degrees is not on the unit circle. So we're going to start by finding a positive coterminal angle. So I'm taking negative 495. I'm going to add 360, not just once, because that would still be a negative. I have to add it twice. When I add it twice, it's going to give me the angle 225. So if I'm thinking about, okay, where's 225 degrees located in my unit circle? It's going to be in the third quadrant. So that ordered pair is going to be negative root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2. Once again, cosine is first, sine is second. So because I'm asking for cotangent, I don't have that information. But remember, sine and cosine actually relate. Remember, the tangent, it's sine divided by cosine. But here's the thing. I don't want tangent. I want cotangent. Well, cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So if tangent is sine over cosine, that means cosine over sine. This is what we want to focus on. So I already have the fact that my cosine is negative root 2 over 2, and my sine is another negative root 2 over 2. Negative divided by a negative is a positive, and when I divide the exact same thing, it's going to give me positive 1. Now I want to find cosine of negative 23 pi over 3. So once again, the moment I see a negative angle, I know I'm not going to be able to find it in my unit circle. So we are going to find a positive coterminal angle. Because my denominator is 3, 2 pi over 1, I'm going to turn into a denominator of 3, which means that we want to be adding and subtracting 6 pi over 3. Okay, so negative 23 pi over 3. Obviously, adding is the way to go. Adding once isn't going to help us. Adding twice, which is then technically 12 pi over 3, that's still going to be negative. A third time would be 18, which still gives us a negative. So then we got to do it 4 times, because if I have 6 4 times, remember that's 24. So negative 23 plus 24 means that we have pi over 3. All right, so pi over 3 is in the first quadrant. That gives us the ordered pair 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. Remember, if I want the cosine, in an ordered pair, cosine is first and sine is second. So I already have the answer. It is positive 1/2. So pause the video and please try these checkpoint problems. Okay, had you used your unit circle, hopefully you would have gotten there a little bit quicker. I did show you how to do it with the sketch as well. But remember, tangent, you can't find it on the unit circle, so you have to think about sine and dividing it by cosine. You should have ended up with -1. For the second problem, if you do your positive coterminal angle, it gives you the first quadrant. Sine is what we want. Sine is in the ordered pair. It's the second value, so it's 1/2. And that's us evaluating trig functions without a calculator.